afterwards, but
Okay.
that's my honest update. Wah, wah, wah. Not what I wanted it to be. Even my boss said some really, really interesting things, and I felt like I really missed the boat, not reframing in the moment.
Okay. Did you have at least one situation where you made some kind of pattern change or some kind of linguistic change for the person?
Nothing's coming to mind.
Okay.
I think I felt like some of the lack of I felt like some of the block was that I wasn't being brave, because asserting myself would,
Maybe it was that, not that you weren't being brave, you just didn't see the opportunity in the moment and just needed quicker reflexes.
Yeah, I really did. So.
You guys noticed that one, right?
Yeah.
Oh. I take comfort knowing that tomorrow's a new day.
It's not that it's a new day, just a new opportunity.
Right? It's not that I failed this past week, it's that I haven't failed this week yet.
There you go.
Except that was framed in a negative, but I haven't failed yet.
Well, not yet. Not again.
Yeah. Oh.
Steve, how about you, Steve?
Well, okay, so two things. Yes, I've noticed on business phone calls that, and sometimes it just comes out. I don't even think about it, which is really cool. But I am starting to do reframes and then a little hypnotic language after that, where I'll take what somebody said and I'll tell a little story or something to reframe their understanding of it. And then I'll follow that with, so I know that you understand that, whatever I just said. and it's, it doesn't offend anybody. In fact, I get agreement, and I still, sense, because they're phone calls, but I still sense that I've got great rapport with them. It's really pretty cool. And in fact, it seems like that's helped the rapport that I've been working with. When you are working with people just over the phone, those things can be harder to develop rapport and harder to make sure you've got it, that sort of thing.
I remember, and as a side note to kind of the office corporate thing, what was beneficial for me was having a whole bunch of conversations that didn't matter. And so I could say anything, and I could see to what extreme I could go and not break rapport.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And so, if you kind of worried about it, then you can't really get a good calibration for how far you can take it.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, you're the CEO of a company, you're kind of untouchable. It doesn't really matter what you say to other people. And so you can go to the extreme and be like, oh, dang, that offended somebody. Maybe I should dial it down just 10% less, right? And 10% less gets you the result that you wanted. Mm-hmm. But if you're, a middle management, you're kind of worried what somebody is thinking, and you go 50%, maybe you could have gone 90% and had a better result at that time. But it's best to do what's in your best interest, not necessarily test out all your language skills the moment you get there and then piss everybody off.
Well, your frame around that concept, I think, was really important. In other words, conversations that didn't matter. I remember when I used to take ski racing lessons, and all of us would tell each other, if we're not falling down, we're not trying hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
Another way to phrase that is, if you've never gone too far, you don't know how far you can go. And I think besides just sounding kind of fun and flip, there's a lot of truth to that. But you want to do that in a way that in a situation where you're not going to hurt yourself too much.
It's part of the reason I give examples on the extreme. I want to take it all the way to the extreme to see what it would be like if this happened, all the way to this extreme, see what it would be like there.
Right.
I think that helps us really with the distinctions.
Absolutely.
When they
So the other thing, so the other thing this week was Thursday night, observed somebody who's in this conversation with us now do a marvelous thing with Sylvia, who did all sorts of things and put them together, didn't you, Valerie?
I guess I reframed Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But that wasn't like in real life. That was like in class.
Come on now.
It was real life it was Sylvia's real life.
That's true. It was her real life. Yeah,
you did that. You did a reframe, a little sleight of mouth. You did a metaphor, some suggestive language there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And she did it really well. It was pretty cool to watch.
What was this?
Sylvia was talking about something that was stuck in her that she wanted to release or let go. And as a class, we were all talking. We were all talking her through it, just trying
really cool
things. And so instead of making it about her letting it go, I asked her if she would loan it to me. And then we made it about my needs instead of hers.
So you disassociated and she taught you how to have the problem?
Not how to have the problem, but just to borrow it for whatever I would do with it. I tried to convince her it would be useful to me because I'd actually had a real experience recently where somebody shared a problem and it was useful for me. So I wasn't making that up. But we tried. I don't know. She didn't want to let it go. So
yeah, she was resistant. But it started out with how did it start out exactly? But it was about food, and then she brings healthy food to work, and then she stuffs down all these big muffins and unhealthy things, and then we were kind of like taking turns asking her questions. She realized the stuffing down was a metaphor for keeping something in, and we were all just contributing different perspectives and questions. It was really really pretty cool.
Okay.
The way the whole group's evolving that way, I think.
One of the interesting things that Bandler used to do is he would say, give me the problem. How do I know how to have this problem? Because I've never had this problem. I've never been scared of heights. How do I know that I need to be scared of 2-story buildings? How do I know that I need to be scared of 10-story buildings? Help me have this problem. And so that was one of the patterns that he used back in the day.
Similar to what Valerie did, yeah.
I can see my mom trying to join. It looks like she's having fun.
Yeah.
How about for you, Barb?
Yeah, I actually did some redefining with a friend of mine. He was telling me about this woman that just never pays for anything. She they'll get together and go out for, Taco Tuesday or something. And then she'll just conveniently get up and walk away from the table when the check comes. And then she'll then won't come back. And so he ends up paying. So he was really miffed over it. And then he told me that he went to lunch with this woman and her employee. And it was like a Chipotle or something where you had to walk through the line to get your food.
Well, and the reason they went out was...
Yeah, I was just going to say it. And it was the employee's birthday. So the woman goes through the line, pays for her stuff, and walks away. The employee goes through the line. She has to pay for her own lunch, and then my friend is behind her. So I just said to him, I said, well, it's not that she doesn't want to pay when it's just the two of you. She doesn't want, she just likes to keep her money to herself and only pay for herself. And he sat there and he went, but it was so mean. And I said, I'm like, so I tried to kind of reframe it a couple different times, but he was just like, he really didn't want to see it. He just wanted to stay in his anger over it.
Okay.
And then at one point I just asked him, I said, so, this is really bothering you. So what are you getting from letting this bother you? And he just was like, he didn't even know how to answer. And so then he just quickly changed the subject.
Huh.
Yeah. So it was rather interesting
I
conversation.
wonder about that too. Sometimes I'll have that issue here, because you'll go out to like dinner or something like that, and it's really like $2 per meal or something like that. It's not something expensive. But what I've noticed is that there's some people that you pay for, they'll always take advantage.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's kind of my rule not to pay, or at least to expect half and half.
Right. Well, and that's what one of the things I said to my friend, I said, well, why don't you, when you invite her to join you for drinks or dinner or something, state it up front that, you're going Dutch. I said that, you expect that she's going to pay her portion. And then if she doesn't want to pay, then you just don't go.
I wonder what her highest intent is. Because if we look at it as parts, we could look and we could say, okay, well, what's she after? Is she out for a free meal, or is she out for his company? Does she have a limiting belief that's holding her back from paying?
Right.
Or is it that she just wants to use him for his ability to pay?
Right. Yeah. And that's what I wonder too, because he's told me a couple different times the story of they were somewhere, she got cold. She asked to borrow his sweatshirt. It happens to be one of his favorite sweatshirts. So he said, sure, you can borrow it. And she's never returned it. And when he's confronted her about it, she just goes, I just love that sweatshirt. And she won't offer to pay him for it. She doesn't offer to give it back to him. He's pointedly asked her, I told her, I want my sweatshirt back. It's not yours. I want it back. And she...
Wait, and they're still going out for drinks?
Yeah, I know. That's one of the things I said to him. I said, I just think you need to just drop her as a friend or whatever this is going on. I said, just get her out of your life. Just walk away and leave it. But he's getting something from it, so he won't do it.
What's interesting in that?
Say it again, Valerie?
He's getting something to complain about.
Yeah.
True.
He feels important in front of Barb size because he has something to complain and talk about all the time. But what's interesting is that the behavior is going to generalize everywhere, usually in a relationship like that. So, for example, if she takes the sweater, she'll also not pay for dinner. She'll also take in that way. And conversations will be the same. They'll be all about her and nothing about him. Unless she has the ability and the sensory acuity, maybe even the flexibility to switch it. If she's not thinking about it and she's running on kind of autopilot, what you'll likely see is the conversation will be all about her or feeling her values rather than his as well. And so it's going to be full all the way around. It's not going to be just a sweater. It's not going to be just paying. It's going to be everything. Conversations, driving, and it'll go into most of our relationships too, I imagine.
Sure. I think you're exactly right, Sean. And in fact, Barb was sharing all of these stories with me and more. And apparently this woman is, hi, Becky.
Hi. You guys couldn't see me, but I've been listening.
Oh, okay. No, we couldn't. But anyway, this woman is apparently a dog breeder, and she's quite successful and makes good money. And after Barb told me a bunch of these stories, all of a sudden it hit me. She's the alpha dog. I mean, it was a label that fit in multiple ways, but it's exactly what you just said. If someone's like that, it's going to be in every corner of their life.
Yeah.
Oh, we lost Valerie.
Oh, shoot. Are you in the dark over there, Mom?
I'm in my room. I just got my little lamp on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not in the dark, but the light's behind the computer.
Okay. You didn't happen to see the video, I take it. I uploaded it probably a little bit late for you to see.
Yeah, I did. Actually, I had Valerie going to work and changing all of our meetings and stuff. Is that what you're talking about?
Okay.
Yeah.
The last one, I believe I posted it yesterday, the video.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So redefining a consequence?
Redefining a consequence, to make it something that doesn't sound so negative.
The two patterns essentially that we covered, yeah.
Wait, can you run over those real quick again? Because I was listening to it, but I didn't identify two patterns.
Yeah, so redefining is the first one that we went over. It's where you change a phrase or one word in the sentence to make it something else.
Okay.
And so Valerie had said earlier that she was, or she alluded to it, I don't think she said it explicitly, but was a failure this week for not utilizing the patterns, which we proved that to be wrong anyways. But we would say it's not that you were a failure, it's just that you lack the opportunities to take advantage of it.
Right.
And so we changed the word failure to lack the opportunities to.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Stephen, what do we do in consequence?
The idea is taking what they've said and just showing kind of the logical endpoint of their thinking. I think that's right. Where did I see that somewhere? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Can you give us an example?
I could say something like, I just can't make her happy. And someone could respond to me, well, great, then you don't have to try anymore. Like that, right?
And Barb, what kind of response is usually going to come from that?
I'm trying to remember. It's usually, the response is usually going to be something on the positive side, where the person's probably going to agree and go, yeah, you know, you're right.
Or
they're going to be challenged by it.
Yeah, push back. Yeah.
Or they're going to push back. They're going to like, what do you mean I can't do that? Or
what do you mean I shouldn't try anymore?
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Push back, and probably going to challenge them to do it, to actually do what they don't think that they can do.
Which then it's super beneficial for us, because then they're fighting to do what they just said that they can't.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Hello, little man.
We have a dinosaur in the room. Hello.
Uh-oh, gotta go.
I'll stand over here.
Okay, so I just want to kind of refresh just a little bit more on the things that we've learned. Essentially, beliefs are relationships. I want to make sure, Mom, that you're on board with that. They're relationships. I have a belief saying that this is one thing that has to have a relationship with something else. For example, I'm not good enough. I have a relationship with being good enough. Or if I say this is a sturdy chair, this is a reliable car, the car has a relationship with being reliable.
Okay.
And the thing about that is that all of that stuff is subjective. A reliable car to whom? A reliable car means what? Who knows? It's all just an interpretation based on a subjective reality that somebody has. What's a car? It's all just speculative. So if these beliefs, they're not really real in that way, then we might as well make up beliefs that maybe aren't or don't have to be real, but ones that'll help us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so we'll be looking at beliefs that serve us rather than beliefs that don't. The difference between them, well, the similarity in them is that they're both not real.
That's exactly what we've been talking about on Thursday.
Good.
If we don't know what's real or how things are exactly, then it's just a belief.
Right.
So why not make that belief one that helps us instead of one that's
right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So we'll first look at chunking down today. And so these are a little bit more of the language patterns that we're looking at. And last week we had the Dilts model, the triangle for us. And this is a little bit different than what we'll be doing this week. we'll be using the language to get more specific and chunking down. And so it's breaking a belief into pieces to change the meaning. So usually when we have a belief, it's generalized. Such examples are that will never work, or you never follow through, or you're always coming up with ideas that are too risky.
Okay.
From our meta model training, what we know in all of these are generalizations. These are higher level generalizations, and some of them are using universal quantifiers. So always, never, those words aren't necessarily true in their essence as well. And so we already know we have a fault in linguistics. We could use our meta model and we can break it down and we can get more specific, or we can just use a DILT sleight of mouth pattern and we can just go straight for the belief.
Okay.
So if we're looking at this in meta model versus DILT's model, our meta model is going to go, we're going to get specific with the belief, we're going to get even more, and we're going to challenge it. Our DILT's model is going to accept the belief, but it's going to get it to its more specific process.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, you're the only one saying okay.
Yeah.
I think everybody thought you were talking to me.
No, not really. We're going through the new stuff for everybody here.
Can you say again what you just said, Sean, about how the DILT's model works in this? Just that last part you said.
Yeah, so the DILT's model, and I usually refer to the DILT's model as a logical levels model.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily correspond to this, although it can. So, for example, if somebody has an identity statement of I'm not good enough, you might be able to say, well, what behavior specifically would you need to be good enough? While that's both kind of meta model and DILT's sleight of mouth patterns mixed in, where we're chunking down the I to a behavior, what behavior would you need to be good at this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It makes
Yeah.
And we
sense.
won't specifically use the whole DILT's model, the logical levels in this as much. We'll be looking more at breaking down generalizations into specific processes, or just taking them to where they're more chunked down. So a few examples here, and these are the examples that we'll work through throughout all of these. And I'll go ahead and just pull this up on a screen share for us. Okay, and I will blow this up. Okay, so these are the main examples that we'll be working with. So he is learning disabled. This is only going to lead to failure. This car is too expensive, and I am unattractive. And so what we'll do, we'll look at. So if we're looking at does learning disabled, this is going to be our first one. I'll go through this in specific chunks so we make this definitely easy for everybody to see here. So he is learning disabled. If somebody says that to me, usually it might be in the context of a husband and wife relationship. He is learning disabled. And so I might ask my wife, for example, does learning disabled also mean they are disabled from taking in new information? So what we've done here is we've broken down learning disabled, and we've chunked it down to taking in new information. So likely if somebody is learning disabled, specifically they would be able or not be able to take in new information.
So you've taken he is learning disabled, and you've made a you've asked a question, but you're directing that conversation. In other words, I was thinking that a good response could be something like, what does learning disabled mean, or how do you know that he's learning disabled, to get a better understanding of what that means to them.
Uh-huh. And so in the sleight of mouth patterns that we're doing, our whole intent is to direct their thinking, direct their beliefs, and change their beliefs. We're not interested in them imposing their beliefs on us. We want to impose new beliefs on them. So you're right, in our meta model, if they said that the person is learning disabled, we could go ahead and we can turn around, well, what specifically is learning disabled? And then they might say, well, they're not able to take in new information.
Right.
But we want to go ahead and just give it to them and kind of just say this is what it is for them. And we do that by making a short enough bridge for them to cross.
Okay, so where are we pointing them with this response?
So which one's better, being learning disabled or being or not having the ability to take in new information in this regard?
Well, it sounds like what you were just saying, in that person's mind, they're the same thing, because he would probably say, in response to, does this also mean that? He would probably say yes. Would he not?
Exactly, I would say.
So I'm trying to figure out where this, since you want to direct him, where is it you're trying to direct this person?
So likely is the case that we can prove that the son is able to take in new information.
Okay. So so basically you're chunking down. You're saying there's this big, huge label, learning disabled. You're trying to point him to some key piece of that, and then you're going to disprove that key piece.
Exactly, and that's easier to prove than learning disabled.
Right, okay.
Because learning disabled is a big label to put on somebody, and it's going to mean different things to different people.
Right.
So, I mean, we could draw it up even further. We could say it's also maybe, and this is going to be different from every different person. So we could also say it's stupid. We could also maybe say that it's can't read. Right? We could say probably a whole bunch of different things. And if we remember that this is just like if we have mode of transportation, and then we can go car,
Bus, or, yeah.
and we could say Toyota, right? And so this is the same thing that we're doing there, but we're just doing with learning disabled.
Okay.
Does that all make sense for you? Questions on that so far?
Makes sense.
I'm good. I'm there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if somebody says to me he is learning disabled, what else could I say that could be similar to that in a chunk down form of language?
I didn't get there soon enough. Does this mean, and this is anticipating the next step, but something like, does this mean that they can't learn anything in school?
Okay. So maybe having an inability to learn.
Right.
Which would more or less be chunking sideways, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe. But where I was, I mean, that was sort of like anticipating the next response, because then you would say, well, he's already in 5th grade, right? Or something like that. So he has been learning in school.
Okay. Okay.
Because you were saying the point of directing them to a concrete piece of that definition is you set that up so that you can then disprove it.
Okay. So what has he been doing the last 5 years?
Yeah, something like that.
The
Right.
last few grades. I would say exactly that's chunking sideways, and that's another pattern that we're not necessarily going over, but it's absolutely there, definitely.
Okay.
I'll give you an example here. I gotta grab this guy again. So learning disabled, if I chunk that down, it could also mean having challenges with mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
It's a more specific form of it. So maybe I come to the teacher and the teacher says, well, he's learning disabled. Okay, if I'm using redefining, I could say, is it that he's learning disabled, or is he just having trouble with mathematics? And that's a more specific, that's that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can combine these as well. We could use redefine with also chunking down and say he's not learning disabled, he's just having troubles with math.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
What else is also similar to learning disabled? What we're going to see here, and I'll give you this little model here, is that we find the keyword. So our keyword is learning disabled, and then we chunk it into smaller chunks. And that's how it's relatable to how you can do this process all the time.
Well, some kids learn with in a different way. Like, you know, I don't know how to phrase that really, but some kids don't learn the same as other kids. You know what I mean?
Okay. Let's get more specific with learning disabled. What specifically is an example of learning disabled?
What about like a poor test taker?
Okay.
I know it's kind of sideways, but
Yeah. I think that one might be even a little bit better for us. Let's go ahead and use that. Okay. So what specifically is example of him taking a test poorly, or what is an example of a poor test taker?
can't finish the test. Can't
Somebody-
deal with time constraint, so it doesn't matter how well he does or slow.
Okay.
Can't do it under pressure. Can't take a test under pressure. Just forgets all the answers, really.
Okay. What else?
Let's see.
Overthinks it.
I had that thought too. Yeah.
I'm a poor test taker. This one feels personal.
Or I was thinking, is it a poor test taker, or is it they just didn't study?
Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah.
This one's pretty big from Barb, so that can go there, but it can also be a behavior.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here if we look at our logical levels, our Dilt's model?
Yeah, so that talks to the behavior plus the competency, and which really can lead to the belief that this person's a poor test taker.
Right.
And maybe it's just a behavior.
So he is an identity.
Mm-hmm.
It's who he is. He didn't study is a behavior. What else could we do in that realm?
Well, yeah, you could address it at the environment level and say,
What's he never studies?
what's that?
What is he never studies?
It's a generalization.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. What else is it also if we look at our DILTS model?
I think it's a behavior.
If that generalization is true.
True, right?
One up. He didn't study.
Competency?
He didn't study as a behavior, right?
Right.
And he never studies is a behavior done multiple times.
So that's a competency.
Exactly.
Okay, I can see that.
There's his environment.
He doesn't have time to study.
Mhm.
There you go.
Environment. Yeah.
So we can use all this to go ahead and change the meaning of he's a poor test taker.
Mhm.
So let's do it with words now. So I'm talking to you, I'm the teacher, and I say he's a poor test taker. Go ahead and rephrase that for me, or ask questions, redefine, but use chunking down here for us. Start with, yeah, Barb.
Is it that he's a poor test taker, or is it that he doesn't understand the material?
Okay, so doesn't understand the material would be moving away from an identity shift where we have poor test taker and doesn't understand the material is could be seen as a behavior or a competency.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just seen it. Here it might be challenging. Why do you think? If you went ahead and you said this to the teacher, why do you think she might have a hard time understanding or accepting this challenge?
She likely wouldn't understand the difference.
Right, that's what I was gonna
Well,
say.
yeah, he's poor at taking tests because he doesn't understand the material.
Okay.
But then you could chunk down even further and say, and ask,
Question.
why doesn't he understand the material?
Okay.
Is it that you're not teaching it well enough?
Yeah.
Or is it that you're teaching it in Spanish?
Let's do that with our Sleight of Mouth, okay? So she says he's a poor test taker. You say, is it that he's a poor test taker or doesn't understand the material? And she responds, well, yeah, he doesn't understand the material. Then your response is, in Sleight of Mouth. If we chunk down, understand the material one more time. It's not that he doesn't understand the material, he doesn't understand the teacher.
Oh. Yeah.
Or if we don't use redefining, we could just say, yeah, he doesn't understand the material, but couldn't that be because he doesn't understand the teacher?
Could he understand the material if only it were being taught in Spanish?
Or that, yeah.
Yeah.
Could he better understand the material if it were taught in Spanish?
Very real issue, I think, for a lot of students
Right.
now, right?
Yeah.
So,
Let's change Spanish. Could it be that he would understand material if it was better taught competently?
Yeah, I can imagine the response you would get to that. But if you said it maybe differently, like, so he doesn't understand the material, but could it be that he needs to be taught that material in a different way or by a different teacher? Or early in the morning when he's more awake, or, something.
Mhm.
Would it be better if he had the class at 8 a.m. or 3 p.m.?
Not right after lunch or something. Yeah.
Absolutely. How do you guys feel about this example? We'll do a few more, so.
So what is it exactly we're trying to accomplish here with the teacher?
We're going to eventually change her belief. So she comes to me and she says, he's a poor test taker. We want to change that to maybe it's on her. Maybe it's on the test room. Maybe it's on the time of class. Maybe it's not that he's a poor test taker. Maybe it's that he never studies. Because if he's a poor test taker, there's not a lot of room for maneuvering.
Right.
It's not that he's a poor test taker, it's that he got a poor test result.
Exactly. Because that we can change. That happened one time, we can fix that. But if my teacher believes that my son is a poor test taker, well, that's not going to bode really well for my student going forward in that class. Because if she goes forward with that assumption, she's going to assume that he's not a good test taker, and there's no movement to make that a better process.
Yeah. Okay. So essentially, when we look at that first statement, it's a stuck statement. There's nowhere to go from there.
Right.
So we want to change the belief so we can open up new options to get movement.
Exactly.
Got it.
Same thing with learning disabled. If you have a kid that's learning disabled, okay, we'll just put him in a class. He can be learning disabled with the other kids.
Yeah.
And so that's an example of when we put a nominalization on it, the process of learning, being learning disabled, it limits the process. But if we turn that back into a process, then we have movement. So if you're a poor test taker, that's who you are. Okay, it's not going to change, or it's going to be hard to change. It's hard to change identity compared to a behavior. And so that's where we want to go. We want to chunk down and say it's not that he's a poor test taker, he just didn't study. Cool there? How you doing there, Mom?
I'm doing good. I'm following.
Yeah?
It's tougher than you think to come up with different ideas in this aspect.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, and language is so precise. It's so crazy what you can do with it. So here's the next one for us. This is only going to lead to failure. And so what we want to do is we want to chunk down failure. And by failure, you mean not reaching your goal. So failure here is a nominalization. Failure is actually an action. It's a verb. You can do failing. It's a process. You do this, this, and this, and it equals failing. But when you have it in a nominalization, it doesn't have any movement to it. Oops. So what we do here is we would go ahead and we would take failure. Okay, what also is failure if we chunk it down? What specifically is failure?
Not meeting the deadline. It's not that the work's not done, but it's just not done on time.
There you go. And we can do something about that, can we not?
Oh, yes, we can. We can change the deadline.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
That's what we do all the time. Let's just push that back. Now we're meeting our goals.
Okay, what else specifically is failure?
Losing.
What is it?
Losing.
Losing, okay. And what specifically is losing?
Losing the game. Losing.
Against others.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're not the best. You're not top.
Not meeting a specific objective.
We'll go with that just for simplicity. Okay, what else specifically is failure?
not trying hard enough.
Okay. What about not preparing enough? Okay. We want to go ahead and make failure and anything else. Anybody have anything they want to add?
Not meeting 100% of the objectives, where failure is all or nothing.
Ooh, okay.
Right.
Fine.
You get 80% of the way there. It doesn't matter. 80% counts as 0.
Okay. Okay, so let's turn that into some sleight of mouth patterns. So, Valerie, go ahead and do not meeting every objective. This is only going to lead to failure.
This is only going to lead to failure. It's not that this is going to only lead to failure. It's going to lead to 80% of the work being done.
Well, yeah, which is failure.
Failure. Only leading towards failure. It's only leading towards
Okay, so let's make it really simple. This is only going to lead to failure. And so let's use the same example and say, and by failure, you mean not meeting every single objective. And so likely what you get is a yes response, but that's leading them. And so some of these belief changes are going to instantly shift a belief right around. This one's more along the lines of leading them along the way. And so, okay, say we say it's going to be not meeting every objective. The person says yes. And then we have the opportunity to then dig into seeing about meeting those other objectives or what it's going to mean if we don't meet those other objectives. So we could say then not meeting every one of those objectives is going to lead to complete failure. And then we might get a polarizing response from there, and then we have some movement with it. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Mom, for you, go ahead and pick out one that you want to try out here. I say to you, this is only going to lead to failure.
And you're wanting me to turn it around?
Yeah, so you have failure, and what you're going to do is you're going to chunk down failure. And so you can use the structure that we have. You could say, and by failure, you mean one of these things is specifically meant by failure.
And so by failure, you mean not getting an A on your test exam?
Okay. Fair enough. And then we have a lot of movement because then we have an A, and then we have a lot of range before an F.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would say to that is, yeah, it would be failure if I didn't get an A.
Mm-hmm.
Then what could you do?
Mm-hmm. So it would be failure if you didn't get an A. I don't know.
And if you didn't get an A, you'd be a failure at life.
Right.
That's consequence.
But then they would be like, no, that's not correct.
And that's what you want them to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense now.
And so that's mixing a few of the patterns in. That's a consequence. You know, if you don't get an A here, you're going to be a failure at life. You're going to be on the streets homeless. And then likely what's going to happen, they're going to give you a polarizing response saying, no, I wouldn't be a failure at life. Okay,
Right.
now they're fighting to not be a failure, which is more of what we want.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Questions on that so far? Good. No questions?
No.
I'm just observing myself, and I'm finding it really helpful to think about my summary that I gave you a minute ago, where you're looking at a stuck situation and you're trying to change somebody else's understanding of it for the purpose of opening it up to new possibilities for movement.
Okay, yeah.
So just like you said, you know, the movement is, so you're going to be a failure in life? Well, no, not, you know. When I think about your questions, looking at to move towards movement, it just really helps me see how to approach it.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely a beneficial way to look at it. Always about movement, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try this next one. This car is too expensive. And you see in that there's no movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we go to the example, and this is chunking down at its finest. Actually, the car's brakes, tires, and windshield wipers are just as expensive as any other car. It is the engine that is of superior quality to ensure performance. So notice here, it's pacing and leading also, where we say that the brakes, tires, and windshield wipers are expensive, just like any other car. But it's the engine that's of better quality or more expensive. And what we've done here is we've chunked down to there's a car, but there's also pieces of a car.
Interesting. You're reminding me of this woman that used to live in the same apartment complex as me, and she was getting ready to buy her second Yugo or some car like that. And another friend of hers was trying to talk her out of buying another Yugo, and she said, it's the only thing I can afford. So the point was that her friend was trying to make was trying to reframe it to say, if you bought a more expensive car, it would last longer. You wouldn't be ready to buy your second Yugo, right? So you can deal with it at that level. So yes, it's more expensive up front, but it's cheaper in the long run, or, you know, that sort of thing.
Okay, tied to that, change frame size, because that's the one we're going to go over just in a few minutes here.
Right.
That's called changing frame size, and we'll go into that one. That's a good one too. So here we have the car, and we could redefine the car. We could also say that there's a bunch of car parts that are totally inexpensive, but when put together, they form something valuable.
Okay. So more in that mode with what I was saying, but phrasing it differently. It's not that the engine is more expensive for superior performance, but all of these, you could say all of the parts of the car are better quality.
Yeah, and so what you're looking at here is you're changing the frame size. What we're doing here is we're looking at a
still
car.
Changing the frame size? Oh, okay. I was.
No, you're okay there, but I want to point out the distinction because you're already well on the track towards this one, and so changing frame size is where you look at it a larger frame of what we're looking at in the conversation. So if I tell you that the car is too expensive, I'm on a car dealership lot and I'm looking at this car in a one-time frame.
Right.
But your friend is looking at it over a frame of 5 years. So this car isn't expensive. This car is expensive now, but in 5 years, it's going to be the same price. Because you've expanded the frame size. Okay. This car is expensive now at this one time. Yeah, but in 5 years, when you have to buy your second Yugo, it's going to be the same price. And so we'll go more in depth with that one. I'm going to do the last example of chunking down, and then we'll do chunking up because that'll make a lot more sense for us. How would you guys say you're doing on chunking down so far?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get the concept. I'm having a hard time like actually doing it, but
it's challenging. is challenging, but definitely look at it in the movement way. And then the essence of this is the meaning changes by looking at a smaller part of something. So when you have the car example, the whole car is expensive, but if I have windshield wipers and if I have tires, then the whole meaning of expensive is changed. Yeah, you're right. These windshield wipers are expensive, just like any other car. And so the meaning's changed. Well, I don't really care about windshield wipers. But the value when you put it all together means everything. Ask your questions as you have them.
What are you laughing at?
Just the look on your face.
Oh. Yeah, I'm trying to grok that.
Okay.
Would you be able to come at it in a different direction? Like, is it that the car is too expensive, or is it that you don't make enough money for this car?
That's more along the lines of changing or redefining.
Okay.
So what's changed there is you're redefining the car being expensive compared to you making money. It's not that the car is too expensive, but you don't make enough money. You're changing the focus by changing the direction of the conversation.
Okay.
So this one, I'm unattractive, which taking forward, it's a large generalization. So if we chunk it down, and this is probably the best example for us, is it your nose or your eyes that make you so unattractive? It's your nostrils, isn't it? So the meaning has been completely altered by chunking it down. We say I'm unattractive, we could also say my nose is unattractive. We could also say my nostrils are hideous.
My ears are gigantic.
My eyebrows are furry. That's for you, Sean.
Yep.
He has eyebrow fetish.
Absolute worst thing on a girl is if she has a unibrow or funky eyebrows. In my perspective of the world.
Okay, we need to change your frame on that. We need to what's the right term that I'm looking for? Joe, change the frame size on that. If eyebrows are the biggest problem.
Okay. How would you do that?
Like or dislike to like, Stephen.
I would say something like, let's see. I agree. Personality is completely irrelevant.
Okay. Or if you're concerned about eyebrows, wait till you meet her mother. That's changing frame size because it's a larger frame of time, a larger implications. All of these, the meaning has changed based on what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at I'm unattractive, now this is going to mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And likely for this person, it's probably not going to be these things, which is good. We want to point light to that. So if they say I'm unattractive, I would say, well, is it your bug eyes? That's it, isn't it? And they say, no, it's not that. It's I just never get compliments from men or something like that, right?
I have bug eyes? Now I feel even worse.
Yeah, and imagine you feeling that bad, how it'll feel in 5 years. So this is probably the easiest way we can structure this, and we can break down chunking down in this. It's looking at unattractive, what specifically about you is unattractive. And our best bet is to go to a polarizing response. If the person doesn't believe something about them and it's kind of comical, then it's going to break it. It's going to interrupt the pattern the quickest. What likely will happen is you'll say, okay, is it the furry eyebrows? They're like, no, my eyebrows aren't furry. What are you talking about? Okay, well, is it the big nostrils? And then they say, no, it's not my big nostrils. And then you say, okay, well, if you don't have furry eyebrows and you don't have big nostrils, then what are you worried about?
And then
we
got a
got
really dangerous path to go down with a woman, I would think.
Try it. Report back to us next week.
Yeah, no, thank you.
And we'll see just Stephen. Or what would be even worse, what we might have to worry about is we just saw Barb.
Yeah.
You can't make it this week.
Questions on chunking down before we move on to chunking up?
No, it's making more sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So chunking up is going to be the exact same thing, except where we're going up. And what we do here is we expand the belief to change the meaning, but we go a step higher in classification, and it changes the meaning. So if we go back to our learning disability from before, a learning disability is an example of what? Remember, that's our chunking up language.
Mm-hmm.
It's an example of what? We go one step higher. That's where we go to adapting. So if we have adapting in our model, a specific example of adapting is learning. And so then we can replace adapting, or we can replace learning disability with an adapting disability. We could say, okay, so the person says to me, he has a learning disability. I say, well, by learning disability, do you mean he has an inability to adapt? Which will likely be met with a polarizing response.
Mm-hmm.
So we take that, we put that with this one. This is what we're looking at here. Here's the example we just covered, Stephen. So he's learning disabled. Does this also mean that he doesn't have the ability to adapt? Having the ability to adapt is likely going to be a chunk higher than being learning disabled. Adapting goes down to learning. And so we chunk higher, it gets down to a different meaning. And so that's going to help us with that. Does that make sense so far? Yes, Valerie?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay. So let's go back to our test taker. He's a bad test taker. Being a bad test taker is a specific example of what?
Or student.
Okay. What else? What else could being a bad test taker be an example of?
Or steadier?
Let's get to a positive one.
Okay.
Positive? What do you mean by a positive?
So
He's good at the conceptual level, but not at the details.
Good one.
okay. Let me try to figure this out. Because you're right.
It makes him a great test maker.
Ooh.
We'll see this in counterexample.
Yeah, you're right. It's counter.
So let me think about this because I asked you guys for a positive one. So let's change, we can do this by changing bad. Okay.
But retains long-term memory well, or something like that.
A test taker would specifically have the ability to maintain information, would he not?
Yeah.
So that's more of a specific example, right? So
Right.
example of a test taker is they have the ability to retain information. So that's chunking down. If we chunk up, a test taker is an example of what? So we could say student. What else could we say?
Driver. I don't know.
Oh, scholar.
Yeah, someone growing in their knowledge, or
Notice how all of the test taker is limited. It's fixed. It's kind of finite. And so if we chunk up and we have a person with goals, then we kind of have more movement with it. So let's get back to the example. If we say the student is a bad test taker, we could say someone with bad goals. Or undefined goals.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the teacher says he's a bad test taker. I say maybe he's just somebody with undefined goals or an undefined direction. Or I could say maybe he is just someone.
Agree.
What is it?
Maybe he's studying in the wrong field.
Okay. How could we chunk that up? Because that's more of a specific, right?
Maybe he hasn't found his best field yet. Or is that kind of just saying the same
He's
thing?
just lost in his field or his direction. Notice how that's chunked up. It's specific. He's a bad test taker. Maybe he's just lost in his direction is a little bit less specific.
mm-hmm.
You could also say maybe he is just growing in his knowledge. Notice these are all Milton-esque, where they're getting up and more, they're so generalized. You could say lacking purpose.
He's learning from his mistakes.
Oh, I like that.
He's embracing experiential failure.
There you go. Good. Let's go on to more of our examples. Let's see. Cool. We'll go, this is only going to lead to failure. And you say, you're right, this is definitely going to give you a form of feedback. Can you see this one?
No. Oh, I thought he meant to.
I did too.
What is it?
I'm with you. We thought you were typing something that we couldn't see.
Oh, okay.
Like,
He was. There it is. Yeah. So we're trying to chunk up from this is only going to lead to failure, right?
Yep.
Your arrow's going the wrong way.
Yeah.
Don't confuse us, Sean.
Yeah, failure is good feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So feedback is the big idea, and failure is just an example of it.
Mm-hmm.
Where if we're doing redefining, we can change failure to change that to something that's like failure, but it's not quite failure. In this, we're just chunking up to feedback, because feedback, then a specific example of feedback is failure.
All right.
And then we'll go next one. Okay, I want you guys to pick out the two chunks that we're working with here. The car is too expensive. There are cash flow considerations that do need to be taken into account when considering this car.
Cash flow. In a way, isn't that chunking down? You're taking this very expansive, too expensive, and narrowing it down to cash flow.
Cash flow what?
Cash flow considerations.
Okay.
I see it going the other way, but
Okay. Let's try to put it in here and see what happens. So we say it's cash flow considerations. And let's see. This is the structure that is being suggested here. So cash flow considerations, let's say that I own a bank or a corporation. If I have cash flow considerations, maybe I'm looking out for the best interests of my company. I see it as being a bigger idea, and then having a decision of something's too expensive, or having a label saying that this is too expensive. So a cash flow consideration, what specifically is an example of a cash flow consideration? Something that's too expensive. You could also have something that's too cheap. Does this make sense?
well, I get the concept. I'm struggling with this example because I still see it the other way around, but
Okay. Let's change the word cash flow considerations.
Financial planning.
Financial planning.
I like that. Seems to be a
Budget.
chunk up to me. Yeah.
2020 budget, like something that's future focused.
How's that?
That makes more sense to me anyway. Yeah.
Okay. So if we said instead, there are some financial budget items. How about that?
Makes more sense to me.
Okay. Again, just chunking up. The big idea is the financial budget planning.
Mm-hmm.
The smaller idea is something that's too expensive, something that's too cheap.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm unattractive. You're definitely different from the norm.
That seems like a rephrase, not a reframe.
Going higher, right? So different from the norm.
Right. Unique. Very
You
unique.
don't fit in with modern beauty standards.
It could be unattractive, right?
If only you'd been born in the 15th century.
So sometimes what will happen is people will associate different from the norm as attractive, and so that's why this works. But it's just a higher level idea there. You guys said
Not
it's
unattractive. You're Rubenesque.
Stand out from the crowd.
There you go.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Not that you're unattractive, you just stand out from the crowd with that nostril of yours. Mom, how you doing on this?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I like it.
Make sense to chunk up?
Yeah.
Okay.
It makes more sense to chunk up than it did chunking down,
Oh, yeah?
I think.
Okay.
Aren't we supposed to be trying to get them into a more positive frame?
Yeah. Or we can go all the way negative and then it flips their thinking and then they go positive.
Right.
As well.
Yeah.
Depending what you're after, yeah. Okay, let's move on to counter example. And so this is just finding something that doesn't fit their current belief. And so let's give you a few examples here. Can be done before because I've never done it before. We take that, we put that into this one, where it is, there was a time you had no experience of doing anything, was there not? So this is directly challenging their belief with something that they know to be true. Something that's directly countering their belief. That first one makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If I care about others, they will take advantage of me. This one's very beneficial in therapies. Isn't it possible to care about others and take advantage of what they have to offer?
Yeah.
This is a reversal. This is classic NLP, classic therapy work, where a lot of the times what you'll see with working with others is that they have the same problem, but they're projecting it on themselves with somebody else.
Okay.
So classic example is maybe a husband and wife. Hold on, there's like a motorcycle rally going on or something. Sometimes they have really, really noisy, it's just one-off bikes. It's just crazy. Noise pollution is just kind of wild here. So oftentimes what you'll have in a therapeutic realm is maybe a husband or a wife, and they'll say, he doesn't care about me, he never talks to me, he never listens to me. When in fact, the real problem is the reversal, where she doesn't care about him, she doesn't take the time with him. It's actually her problem, and she's modeling it onto him, saying that he doesn't do it to her, but she in fact doesn't do it to him.
Okay.
And this is very common.
Yes, it is.
Or a counterexample I can think of from personally for me is I have people often will look at me and they'll say, wow, you're really tall. And I'll say, no, it's just that you're short.
Yep.
I use that one all the time. When they go, oh, yeah, you're right, I'm kind of short.
Very good, yep. Okay, let's look at this one. And I want to change they with you. So let's go back to our example with the teacher. A teacher comes to me and says he is learning disabled, talking about my son. And I say, what if you are just learning or teaching disabled?
Sean, is there supposed to be something on the whiteboard? Because there's not.
No, do you just have access to the whiteboard? Or do you have also the Word document?
No, just the whiteboard.
Just the whiteboard.
Oh, okay. I thought you guys had everything. My mistake. I've been typing all this stuff.
Oh, wow.
Do you see my screen now?
No,
No.
Okay.
There's
we can't see Becky either.
I know.
she's that white ghostly thing moving around.
Oh, goodness.
She's riding her zebra.
Okay.
Oh, I know. I love my
There
zebra
it
cat.
is.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, so he is learning disabled. What if you're just teaching disabled? Say that to the teacher, you're going to have her attention.
Gonna have her attention, yeah.
I'm seriously, I'm gonna give that one to my sister-in-law, so that when the teachers tell her that her son is learning disabled, she has something to come back with. She will have no qualms about using it.
You just want to help her make friends with that teacher, don't you?
Do a counterexample for ADD, please.
Okay, your son has ADD.
He just learns in a more kinesthetic way.
Not a counter.
So we want to go and we want to find an example of something that doesn't fit the belief. So we want to go contrary to what the belief is. He has ADD. Let's even lengthen it. Attention. Deficit.
You were right the first time.
We'll just have Word help me. So he has attention deficit disorder. How could we go directly to challenge that belief in a counter way?
No, he doesn't. You're just hyper vigilant. You're
You,
hyper focused.
Actually, he learns so quickly he gets bored.
Let's what's the opposite of deficit? Deficient.
Deficit.
Deficient.
Surplus.
Okay. So no, he has attention surplus disorder. Or no, you have attention surplus on his attention deficit disorder.
Hypervigilant, yeah.
So you have an attention surplus on his attention deficit. It's not that he has ADD, but you have attention surplus on his ADD.
Oh, I think I'm going to be popular in the years to come with all this.
Do you see how the meaning changes there? That works because it's not him that has the ADD, but it's the teacher who has the too much attention on the ADD.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not him with the problem, but it's the teacher with the problem.
Totally.
Mom, what do you think?
Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
As far as I don't.
I'll give you an easy one. This car is too expensive. I want you to directly challenge that with a counterexample.
I hate to have to think right on the spot like that.
Okay, what's the opposite of expensive?
Cheap.
Yes, poor. You're right. Poor quality is very much cheaper.
Yes, Stephen, you did that great. Yeah, that would be a good one. Car is far too expensive. Well, at least you know it's not cheap. And you want to do the opposite, though, kind of like what Stephen did.
Yeah, so we want to change the meaning. What we're doing here is changing the whole meaning and the focus of the sentence. So what we have here is we have a person who's resistant against buying this car because it's expensive. We want to change the focus and we want to counter the whole thing, reverse it if we can.
So basically, what you're saying is that you might not have to buy another car because this one can last a lifetime.
That's going with it. We want to counter it. We want to break it
Oh,
up.
you want to do the opposite. Okay, let me see.
This is a challenging one. Does anybody have this with cheap? If we go the counter example, if we look at expensive, opposite of expensive, there's going to be cheap. How do we reverse it to change the meaning of the whole thing in a similar way that we did with the teacher?
Yes, I was thinking like, say the car's too expensive. You're just very frugal.
Yeah. Or you're just not budgeting enough.
Yeah, or straight out. You just
like that.
Yeah.
And so we directly counter the resistance with a reversal on what we deem to be the problem rather than that. And so it's a complete change of focus, not on the car, but on the person.
Yeah.
Okay. I can see
Now,
that.
why would this work?
It introduces doubt.
It challenges them as opposed to the car.
Uh-huh.
So the car is too expensive or you're too cheap?
We could do a question on it too. The way I've phrased it here is probably in the strongest way possible, because I want to get as much resistance right out of the way as I can. And it's going to work when they believe that they aren't cheap. If they have the identity, notice here we're going with you are just too cheap. We're attacking their identity. This is going to work when their identity is not of somebody who is cheap.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to work when we have enough rapport and then we counter it. And we have the three things in rapport, because this is a great break in rapport. This is a strong lead, and this works when we have the three things in place. When we have enough rapport, when we have a bridge that's not too big to cross, and when we have the incentive for them to follow us, this is going to work. So if this person believes that their identity is not a cheap person, they will have a polarizing response to this, and they will reject the notion of being a cheap person. And our hope is they will go ahead and see themselves with the car as being expensive and seeing them as an expensive person or a high class person. This also is just, in essence, a lead into that. So if I say the car isn't expensive, you're just too cheap, then they might say, no, that's not true. And I might say, yeah, that's right. You're a person with high class who likes high value things.
Right.
Notice our movement. Notice that I've reshift his perception, his awareness of who he is, who I think he is as well. And if it matches then at that point, him as this high value, high class person, then we have a better chance of having this work out. Because the car was the problem first. Now we made the problem to be the person being too cheap. And we reframe the person being too cheap to the person being of high style. If he sees himself that way, he's going to match our representation of it. Thoughts on that?
It takes a lot of thinking to come up with one. I mean, like, how long before you get quick at responding this way?
You just learn them and you'll get better and better at them, because as Valerie said, you see these scenarios with these opportunities where you can use them. And that's probably the first step. And then you'll start using them and you'll get better and better at using them.
Practice.
Yeah.
I'm known for, like, I wish I would have said that while I was in their presence. I can think of so many things I should have said when I was there.
Well, tell your subconscious to think faster next time.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to change frame size. So this is the one we were talking about a little bit earlier. And so what this is basically, and I'm going to move this up so we can see full screen. It's reevaluating the belief in a context of a longer or shorter time frame, or with a larger or smaller number of people. This shifts the focus and changes the meaning. So Stephen, your example earlier was that the person would say that essentially the car's not too cheap, or the woman had a Yugo that she wanted to buy because she thought it was cheaper than the other one. You
Right.
change the frame size, you make it a longer frame where you have to buy 2 Yugos, then it's the same price. You've changed the meaning because you've changed the amount of time. She was only looking at a fixed price, one purchase, one time. If you change it to 2 purchases 2 times, well, then that might be a different meaning for the context.
Right.
So let's look at a few examples we have here for this. The common one is going to be in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be a trick or a key to the patterns that you can use here. In the long run, the first one is, it can't be done because I've never done it before. In the long run, if we were all competent after not doing something, then likely that would be a good thing. Notice here we're after a polarizing response again.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just stopped doing something, if you tried it once and couldn't do it, that probably wouldn't be a good thing, would it? Another way that we could say that. We could also bring in a metaphor and think of this as chunking sideways. Essentially, if we're chunking sideways and we have a metaphor in this, we could say, well, how long did you give your average baby to walk before you just cut him off and said that he couldn't do it? Think of that as chunking sideways. You give another example of something that somebody didn't just choose once.
Yeah. At one point you couldn't ride a bike. At one point you couldn't drive a car. Yeah.
Exactly.
You had only had one session to earn your driver's license. What would have happened?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if I care about others, they will take advantage of me. And then the counter for that is, might you not have the experience of caring long enough to find out what the advantages of caring are?
Might you not? Okay.
What are we telling this person?
Yeah, you're changing the time frame.
Yeah. What's the deep meaning for him?
If you care about somebody, you'll find out what the advantages of them caring for you in return are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in essence, we've told them one other thing, though, right?
Keep at it.
Cared long enough, yeah.
Yeah. We've also told them something about their experience that we're kind of mind reading from maybe not even knowing.
Right.
Essentially that they haven't cared long enough about somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Or they haven't put enough work into caring about somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But we've changed the frame size. We made it a longer period of time. This gives them more movement. The implication here is that they need to start caring about people for a longer period of time, and then they need to figure out the advantages of caring.
What if you said something like, I'm thinking about changing the number of people, or something like that.
Okay.
What if you say something like, have you never had somebody care about you?
Okay. Let's up it a little bit. What if we have the phrase, if I care about others, they will take advantage of me? What if we say, maybe it was just that you've cared about one person one time, right? That's our implication. So let's go ahead and try to get at them looking at caring about more people and trying them out. We want them to have the possibility of opening themselves up to more people, which is currently unavailable to them because they have this belief. So our intent, our outcome is to get them to open themselves up to more people. If we say, might you have had the experience of only caring for one person? Or might it be that you've only had the experience caring about somebody enough for a limited amount of time? Or could it be that you've only truly cared about a few people, and maybe if you cared about more, things would be different? That's upping our number of people, changing our frame size that way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going the other way in my example, and I'm not sure if it worked, but this was, caring about others, plural. So I went to the one.
Mm-hmm.
I also threw a counter example in there. Have you never had somebody care for you?
Okay.
Which is
Another thing we could do, we could say, well, maybe it's just that you've cared about one person one time. Same thing, we're changing frame size, we're going down to one, and we're hoping for a polarizing response. No, I've cared for 5 people.
And they all took advantage of you?
Yeah, then you could use your meta model.
Yeah.
Or you could go back to this. You could say, might you have not had the experience of caring long enough? Sure, you cared about 5 people, but maybe you didn't experience caring long enough about them.
Mm-hmm.
Our learning disability is learning disabled. Everyone experiences a learning disability at some point in time.
Everybody has things that they're stronger and weaker in.
Something about the future, like just haven't encountered it.
Notice how specifically this is a frame size, though, because we're upping it. He has a learning disability. Everyone experiences a learning disability. We're also pacing a common life experience where we've all had this. We're also saying that a learning disability is something that we all have, and it's relating it to their experience where they've been unable to learn at some time. It's changed the whole meaning just by changing it to everyone.
Yeah, you really watered down the impact of that phrase, learning disabled.
Absolutely, yeah. And we got one more. This is only going to lead to failure. So you might as well do it quickly so there's more time for success. So like potentially this person is looking at a longer time frame. Maybe it's a business operation. Maybe it's a 4-month project. So then we tell them, well, you might as well do it quickly so then we can succeed. And changing the time frame for it. Cool.
I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Sleight of Mouth. There's so much more to it. It's something that we could probably go into the group and probably do it for 2 months and probably have enough to practice with and learn a lot about.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's unfortunate that Sleight of Mouth wasn't kind of incorporated into NLP until the 90s, because I think that people would have got a lot more out of it when NLP was really buzzing and when people were really getting into it. Now I kind of feel like this is a lost art that people haven't got enough of.
Right.
Is there anything else that you feel is in that same category of too little, too late, not incorporated fully, not recognized?
A lot of the work that Diltz has done, I would say. I really believe that if the logical levels, I think if they were found a little bit earlier, then that would have been more beneficial for NLP as well.
Okay.
Part of me thinks that MER, mental emotional release technique, would have been better suited if it was found earlier. But it's a product of the times. And if I'm totally honest with you, that's the only thing of real benefit that I've seen out of the last 20 years that I've studied of NLP that's been of very good use. And they've had some books on NLP in the past few years, but there hasn't been very many new developments, new technology things. But that also comes with the caveat that I haven't studied some of Bandler's new stuff. He has dynamic human engineering, and Grinder has the new code of NLP, which I haven't really looked at as well. So maybe if I looked at both of those,
more books to buy.
Yeah. Maybe if I looked at both of those, and there might be some changes in my thinking there, but yeah. I also, what was I going to say on that? I forget specifically, but yeah, MER is one of the most useful things I've seen come out of the last few years, and these language things are super, super like important. Other things to learn in the Sleight of Mouth frames, and this is kind of implicit in every conversation and every interaction you have with somebody in communication. There's going to be a frame set around the interaction, and this will be something that may be done in the future, maybe something else that happens later. But if we look at the frames and all the different communications that are being done, there's so many, and oftentimes we're unaware of those. So just by saying something to somebody in some way, it's setting a frame for the communication.
Yep. The thing that I find, like when we were going through the NLP training, for example, the language stuff didn't seem to be that, I don't know, impactful to me. And now going through this in detail, I'm really changing my opinion of it. And the thing that I see the most in this is really another dimension of what we're doing on Thursday nights, which is paying attention to state, right now anyway. This is paying attention to the details of words, both the other person's and yours. I mean, how many times do you have conversations, with family or friends, or even, business associates or strangers, but they say something and you instantly know exactly what they mean, and so you just respond to what you think they said. But you could be missing so much, and I love the way going at this stuff in detail, Sean, is really pointing out to me to pay attention to what you think is being said, but other ways that it could be interpreted, not just to understand better what the other person may be saying, but to understand better different options you have for responding to that. I think this is really powerful stuff.
I'd go even further, and you remember how language is a representational system, just as kinesthetic, just as auditory, just as visual is a representation system. I notice now that you're wearing glasses. Notice maybe how you just improved your visual representational system. Maybe you're nearsighted, maybe you're farsighted, but you can see better in a certain way now. Notice also how language is a representational system. And by going through this in depth, maybe now you can see better in language just by going and understanding what's being said.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So part of the work that's done with NLP is the kinesthetics, the auditory. You remember when we did the snapping, or we did the touching, where you touch on the knee? Who was that? Part of that is getting those senses up. Well, those are representational systems. So is language. And for me, I honestly didn't have this appreciation for it as well until 7 months ago, when I came back and I learned the meta model with you guys. Because I learned it and then I was teaching it with you guys, and that for me was the profoundness of how language is that important.
That's a good point. Okay.
It can change people's perception of anything.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Because if you're blind and you get cataracts, or you have your seeing changed where you can actually see, 20 times better, you interpret the world better, you probably move through the world a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
So before, you were totally unaware of people's language and not really knowing what was going on, and now you know somebody's language and how to talk to them better. Now you have a more powerful way to move through the world.
Mm-hmm.